Okay, Jonas, Storytime. We're gonna reboot it. We've had a
We're rebooting it.
we had a discussion. We are now officially the DC the DC movies of this whole sphere. We're just gonna reboot after reboot. This is another Batman-esque reboot of the story time. Um,
Oh my God, yes.
so
That's a good point. That's a good.
we're just rebooting it once again. So we've tried this a couple of times, I think, with different sagas, and using the original text or as close as we can get to them. They are just incredibly long-winded. We had a few
Yeah,
comments that they're difficult to follow. I'm finding it difficult to follow. You're finding
we're
it
finding
difficult.
it difficult to follow it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting pretty. They just get so messy with all the extra information in there, all the names that are very similar. So we're gonna just reboot, and we're gonna find really kind of not heavily edited but readable versions of different stories and go through them, and then people,
Mm.
it's gonna be more enjoyable throughout. So we're just gonna scrap the last saga, and we're gonna go from a book that probably most people have either read or heard of or listened to or seen. And we're going to start with Neil Gaiman's telling of Norse mythology, which is a great book. So people can pick that up and read along with us if they want. It's easily accessible. You can pick up a copy at hornsofodin.com. Little plug there if you want. So, you know,
Yeah. Hey, man, great. Get that shit sold. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that makes I think it makes perfect sense. I think also the only the only saga that we actually ever got through was Ynglinga saga. We actually didn't get through the whole one, but we took the part where Sigurd is doing his thing. The whole part with Sigurd there. That one we actually did get through, which was
yeah.
pretty cool. But that's the only one I think we've gone through fully.
No, we start out with the best of intentions, but they just end up becoming so confusing. And we, like I say, we tried it with a few different ones now. I think the best way is that we find, rewritten, edited ones and go from there. And ones that have just taken out all the information that we don't need.
Yep, yep. That's the one. So let's try. Let's start here with how Mr. Gaiman tells the story of the creation of the world. All right, should we start?
Yeah, let's go. Let's get straight into it.
All right. Before the beginning, there was nothing. No earth, no heavens, no stars, no sky. Only the mist world, or Nibbala, as it's also called.
Oh, all right. I don't.
Ooh, no, actually, yeah, but this is actually gets interesting already, right? Because there's this whole idea of Ginnungagap, right? And it's interesting that Gaiman here uses the word mist world, formless and shapeless, and the fire world, always burning. And those were the only two places. But then there was also Niflheim to the north, which is interesting because Nibbala is actually the root word of Nifl or Nibel, that then becomes Niflheim, the dark world or the mist world. So it's another word for the mist world. So those two words seems to be the same, actually, Ginnungagap and Niflheim in a way. But that's I digress. But either which way, there was only the mist world, formless and shapeless, and the fire world, always burning. To the north was Niflheim, the dark world. Here 11 poisonous rivers cut through the mist, each springing from the same well at the center of it all. The roaring maelstrom called Vegelmir. Niflheim was colder than cold, and the murky mist that cloaked everything hung heavily. The skies were hidden by mist, and the ground was clouded by the chilly fog. To the south was Muspel. Muspel was fire. Everything there glowed and burned. Muspel was light, where Niflheim was grey. molten lava where the mist world was frozen. The land was aflame with the roaring heat of a blacksmith's fire. There was no solid earth, no sky, nothing but sparks and spurting heat, molten rocks and burning embers. In Muspel, at the edge of the flame, where the mist burns into light, where the land ends, stood Surtr, who existed before the gods. He stands there now. He holds a flaming sword, and the bubbling lava and the freezing mist are as one to him. It is said that at Ragnarok, which is the end of the world, and only then Surtr will leave his station. He will go forth from Muspel with his flaming sword and burn the world with fire, and one by one the gods will fall before him. Between Muspel and Niflheim was a... Sorry?
I was going to say, it's interesting that he's always, I guess, always been there. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever heard. I assumed everything. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not so sure about this one, actually. Whether it is specified whether Surtr is Muspel and Muspel is Surtr, whether those two things are the same, and therefore he would always have been there. Because that would make sense, right? Since Muspelheim and Niflheim were always there, makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah.
No, I was thinking, I guess, with it being, because you kind of envisage him as a living beast, like being, but then the story goes on to say that all living things come from, like,
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how important it is, really. I mean, I find the whole thing interesting, right? That there is, in the beginning there was nothing, but yet there was still fire and ice.
Yeah, and there was nothing to stand on, but there were rocks.
I've always seen Ginnungagap and the whole idea of the void as a kind of like a place of magical potential in some sense. That it's there's nothing there, yet there's always the potential for something. And in order for something to come out of that nothing, I suppose the writers or whoever wrote this thing down, or whoever came up with it originally, the primordial creator. There's probably many, you can't of course point to one creator, but I'm imagining that they kind of like, in order for something to happen in that magical void, there has to be something that comes in and then creates something, right?
Is it really that much more insane than something like the Big Bang Theory? Because at the end of the day, we
not
kind of,
really,
as much as we kind of go, okay, that's probably true because of science. You still have to have this belief of there being nothing and this, big bang, this explosion that then expands into nothing, but there must be something for it to expand into. It's not that much different, but also not that much like.
No, but but I mean, the whole thing about the Big Bang is kind of interesting there, because I mean, of course it is totally a theory. Like it's almost like a lot of people, when they reference the Big Bang, it's like they talk about it as if it's like a fact that is how the world, we know that now. We have, that is totally not a fact at all. And one of the thing about the Big Bang is that all the laws of physics that we know from what we can observe right now, they break down at the point of I can't remember, they always talk like some nanoseconds before the Big Bang, right? There's no laws of physics there, so you can't actually describe how the Big Bang happened, to say it in a very simple way. So that's why I can't remember who the fuck it was who said it, but he said about about this, that it's like the Big Bang Theory is like a scientist who ascribed to it. It's like they say, give us one free miracle, the fact that the Big Bang happened, and then we'll explain the rest, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like, because we can't understand how the Big Bang could happen at all, because everything breaks down at the point of it. So therefore, it's like we have to be given that one free miracle of saying that the Big Bang happened, and that's the only way we can explain the rest of the history of the universe in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, your point is very well made, that it's not that much more crazy than this one, actually. I agree with you. That's all I'm trying to say. But anyway, let's get on with it. Between Muspel and Niflheim was a void and an empty place of nothingness, without form. The rivers of the mist world flowed into the void, which was called Ginnungagap, or the Yawning Gap. Over time, beyond measure, these poisoned rivers in the region between fire and mist slowly solidified into huge glaciers. The ice in the north of the void was covered in frozen fog and pellets of hail. But to the south, where the glaciers reached the land of fire, the embers and the sparks from Muspel met the ice, and warm winds from the flame lands made the air above the ice as gentle, as comfortable as a spring day. Where the ice and the fire met, the ice melted, and in the melting waters life appeared. The likeness of a person bigger than worlds, huger than any giant there will be or ever has been. This was neither male nor was it female, but was both at the same time. Wow. The LGBTQ plus blah, 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 blah community gonna fucking love this shit, bro. The first ever being was a fucking trans, bro.
Well, there you go. You heard it. You heard it here. You heard it here.
You heard it here first.
There we go. That's how progressive they were.
They were so prog, man. Unbelievable. Oh, that's so cool. Anyways, the creature was the ancestor of all the giants.
I don't know if that's
called itself.
I don't know if going on to say creature straight away after is the best thing.
This fabulous creature was the ancestor of all the giants. And it called itself Ymir. Ymir was not the only living thing to be formed by the melting of the ice. There was also a hornless cow, more enormous than the mind could hold. She licked the salty blocks of ice for food and for drink, and the milk that ran from her 4 udders flowed like rivers. It was this milk that nourished Ymir. The giant drank the milk and grew. Ymir called the cow Audhumla. The cow's pink tongue licked from the blocks of ice. Licked people from the blocks of ice.
It's so insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think
yeah, it is.
Do you think this idea of it's almost like a sacred cow? Do you think there's any possibility that could have come from like the East?
I think very much so. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that I don't know when the cow was first introduced into the Nordic countries, but I imagine it's a long time ago. Actually, let me just Google that. That's actually an interesting question.
Yeah, it seems. I've always found it fascinating that it's a cow, because usually with this kind of stuff, you associate predatory animals, bears, wolves, ravens. It's always kind of these badass animals, and cows are badass, but it's just, I don't know. It's always kind of stood out to me.
I mean, it would make sense because in Scandinavia, we can see here that the cows already came 4000 BC. That's the first signs of domesticated bovine in Denmark, for instance, in 4000 BC.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that the cow would be a holy, life-giving animal, right?
Yeah.
Makes
And
total sense.
they will
I
have
mean,
seen them
yeah,
feeding the calves. It's kind of, like I say, it's a very life-giving symbolism.
it is, right? I mean, it gives so much milk. It's overflowing with milk, and that's why there's milk for human beings, and we eat them, and all that kind of stuff. It makes sense that the cow would be seen as a kind of holy, a holy
Mhm.
holy animal. And I don't know when the cows started becoming holy in India in the way that they are today. I don't know that either,
Yeah.
but it makes sense that that's a tradition. But the idea of a holy cow is a tradition that span all over the Indo-Nordic trail.
Hmm. Yeah, because it
Totally.
is when
So
it's easy to kind of gloss over, but when you really think about it, this cow gave life to everything apart from Ymir and Surt. Like
yeah,
it's it's pretty important.
it's really important. Yeah, Alvhumla. Yeah, yeah, it's totally important. And yeah, you would have thought there would be more about it, like why it's. But
So
again, we have only these things.
it sounds like a really bizarre joke. A fire giant, a trans giant, and a and a giant cow
And a giant cow
all walk into a
into a
gap.
bar, into a gap. Yeah,
All walk into
they
this
all
Mister.
want
All
it.
walk into a gap. What happens?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing. It's fucking amazing. Um. Anyways, let's go on. The cow's pink tongue licked people from the blocks of ice. The first day, only a man's hair. The second, his head. And the third day, the shape of a whole man was revealed. This was Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Ymir slept, and while it slept, it gave birth. A male and a female giant were born from beneath Ymir's left arm. A six-headed giant born from its legs. From these Ymir's children, all giants are descended. Buri took over these giants, and they had a son, whom they called Bor. Bor married Besla, daughter of a giant, and together they had three sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. So the gods are literally giants.
According to this,
Yeah.
which I guess they. I wonder if it's.
Well, no, but that is true. That
is it through selective? I don't know. Selective breeding that they've got smaller over time, or maybe it's again. I think we've said a few times that like especially if it's Jotun, it might not actually mean giant as in a giant human like we do.
no,
Just a
no.
different species of human, I guess.
I mean, it's the same thing as in Indian mythology. Again, like the gods can be anything from as small as a. There's this story. There was actually a festival in Kerala very recently. I can't remember exactly how the story goes, but it's something like there's some meta god or something ruling an area, and Vishnu wants to test him. So Vishnu becomes as small as a kid, as a young, like a poor beggar child. And then something happens, and then he tricks him and says something like, and then Vishnu becomes as big as the entire universe, and uh, thus tricking this meta god. But like, so size doesn't really matter. That's what I'm trying to say. Size doesn't really matter to these creatures, right? Because they're spirits in some sense as well, right? I mean, so they can be as big and or small as they want, more or less. Because I'm also thinking, like, the whole Thor fighting giants, right? Like, I mean, if Thor is just a tiny thing and he's fighting something as big as a mountain, how
Yeah.
how is that
Scale
even
never
possible, you know?
really works, does it? Because you get even a Ragnarok, it's like, what is it? The Fenrir's mouth will stretch from like sky to earth or whatever, and he'll swallow pretty much everything. And then it's like, oh yeah, but he's gonna fight Odin too. And so it's
Yeah,
like
and yes, and Odin's son,
Vidar. Vidar?
huh?
Is it
Vidar, yeah.
Vidar?
Vidar is gonna step his foot into its mouth at the bottom and the top and tear him asunder, right? So if it's
Yeah.
that if Fenrir is that big at that time, Vidar is pretty fucking huge as well, you know?
Yeah, that's one
So
I've always
yeah.
wondered about as well.
I mean Vidar is literally a giant there, right? I mean he's gotta be really fucking big.
Got to be very big, yeah.
So again, yeah, these things don't really matter. The scales don't really matter. Um
We go
anyways,
on.
yes, Ymir slept, and while it slept, it gave birth. No, sorry, that's all. We got that. Buri took a wife from among these giants, and they had a son. Oh, yeah. Odin, Vili, and Ve. Thank you. Odin and Vili and Ve, the three sons of Bor, grew into manhood. They saw as they grew far off the flames of Muspel and the darkness of Niflheim, but they knew that each place would be death to them. The brothers were trapped forever in Ginnungagap, the vast gap between the fire and the mist. They might as well have been nowhere. There was no sea and no sand, no grass, no rocks, no soil, no trees, no sky, no stars. There was no world, no heaven, and no earth at that time. The gap was nowhere, only an empty place waiting to be filled with life and existence.
I find it interesting that he mentions heaven.
Yeah,
Which I can imagine so many
no
Viking
world.
bros when reading it gets upset at that.
Oh yeah, they would get very upset about that. But he just said sky. Yeah, he says there was no sky, and now he says there's no heaven and no earth. But I
Mm,
suppose that heaven is again just a place where the gods dwell, right? So then he should have
yeah.
written there was no Asgard and there was no Midgard, right? Like that.
Mhm.
But yeah. Anyways,
But then again, he's probably pulling from like Snorri's Prose Edda, which probably will say in it heaven because it it was
yeah,
written down in by a Christian in a Christian time.
yeah, it's very possible. Um, The gap was nowhere, only an empty place waiting to be filled with life and with existence. And so there you have it again, it's a place of potential, like it's supposed to be filled. It was the time for time for the creation of everything. Ve and Vili and Odin looked at each other and spoke of what was needful to do. There in the void of Ginnungagap, they spoke of the universe and of life and of the future. Odi and Vili and Ve killed the giant Ymir. It had to be done. There was no other way to make the worlds. This was the beginning of all things, the death that made all life possible. They stabbed the great giant. Blood gushed out from Ymir's corpse in unimaginable quantities. Fountains of blood as salty as the sea and grey as the oceans gushed out in a flood so sudden, so powerful, and so deep that it swept away and drowned all the giants. Only one giant, Bergelmir, Ymir's grandson, and his wife survived by clambering onto a wooden box, which bore them like a boat. All the
It's
giants we see and we fear today are descended from them.
I find it so fascinating that they called the sea grey and not blue. And I'm guessing Neil Gaiman's probably pulled that from one of the sources. And I remember listening to a really fascinating Radio Lab episode on the color blue. And apparently the color
Yeah.
blue didn't really exist much before. I don't know. I don't know the exact time, but like it's more of like
Yeah, I've heard about that
it's
one.
like a recent color.
Yeah.
The word for blue is a recent thing because it, other than the sky and the sea, it doesn't really exist much in nature, and it just wasn't really used. There just wasn't a word for it, and there was just the sky and the sea were known as other things. And I can't remember. There's a famous book that they use an example of, and like red is mentioned in it maybe like 300 times. Yellow, green, they're in there like in the hundreds, and then I think blue turns up like 4 times or something. It's like a super rare
Yeah.
color when it comes to like historical documents.
Yes, I mean there was something about the color blue only entering into sort of like normal discourses once they figured out how to dye things blue. I can't
Okay.
remember what it was, whether it was by from the use of turquoise, grounded down turquoise or something. I'm not sure, but it
Mm.
wasn't before they started dyeing things blue that blue became normal. I'm finding it a bit far out. I mean, I remember there was a little bit of that theory about like blue then not really existing
Yeah.
because we didn't have a word for it, so we didn't actually have because yeah, if there's no word for it, does it then exist at all? You know, that's one of the did we see
Mm.
it? Were we simply not able to see it? Like
Yeah, do you have to train your
because it
eyes
doesn't
to be
make
able
any
to see it?
sense. Well,
Or
it
maybe it was
makes
just
no
a shade
sense
of a
really because
gray
I mean
or
the question is was the sky then grayer back then and not that blue? I don't know. I mean these are totally above my pay grade kind
mm.
of questions, you know.
I
But the
just find it
weird thing is
interesting that
that no, I'm saying the weird thing is that I believe that Hindu gods have been classically described as blue for thousands of years. So I'm not
mm,
sure, but this is interesting. Gray as the oceans, not as blue as the oceans, right? Yeah,
like I said, there is
yeah.
it was a Radio Lab podcast. So if anybody wants to listen to it, they
I
can
know
do it.
which one. Yeah,
Yeah, it was really fascinating.
it's super fascinating, super fascinating. We only start like really paying heed to blue once we start using it more or something. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah,
it
but
is.
isn't
Yeah,
the sky's fucking blue, mate?
very
The
blue.
sky's
It's
blue as
blue.
fuck.
It is very blue when you look up there. It's pretty blue, and if you
Yeah,
look
isn't
by the
it?
sea, it's pretty blue.
It's pretty fucking blue. What does he say
Interesting.
about the sky? Blah blah blah. Okay, we don't have that yet. Let's see if that comes. Anyways, Odin and his brothers made the soil from Ymir's flesh. Ymir's bones they piled up into mountains and cliffs. Our rocks and pebbles, the sand and gravel you see, these were Ymir's teeth and the fragments of bones that were broken and crushed by Odin and Vili and Ve in their battle with Ymir. The seas that girdle the worlds, these were Ymir's blood and his sweat. Look up into the sky, you're looking inside Ymir's skull. The stars you see at night, the planets or the comets and the shooting stars, these are the sparks that flew from the fires of Muspel. The clouds you see by day, these were once Ymir's brains. And who knows what thoughts they are thinking even now.
They do kind of look like
The wo-
brains because I always think of this as like how it's people trying to explain things that they see through what they know. I guess that's probably what most of mythology is trying to come up with an explanation. So yeah,
yeah.
if somebody got their head split open and these because oh, here's another interesting thing. Apparently, brains aren't brain-like until you like cut the head open and it kind of like dries out like straight away as soon as like if you split a head open. Apparently, they're very liquid like because of all the fluid in there, and like you can kind of almost put your hand through it like a soft liquid. But obviously, once like somebody's cut the top of and the liquid comes out, it dries, it becomes like a solid.
It's like a jelly, you mean? It's more like a
Yeah,
jelly.
yeah, it's like a jelly that's kind
It's
of
like a
I don't
That's
know.
fucked up to think about right now. I'm like thinking about my brain in there, just being like this. jelly thing.
This gooey jelly just flopping around.
Just
Yeah.
bobbing around, yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes sense.
Full of
The world
information
is a
there.
flat. Yeah. Fuck, man. This is public service. Okay, there we go. The world is a flat disk, and the sea encircles the perimeter. Giants live at the edges of the world, beside the deepest seas. To keep the giants at bay, Odin and Vili and they made a wall from Ymir's eyelashes and set it around the middle of the world. They called the place within the wall Midgard. Midgard was empty. The lands were beautiful, but nobody walked the meadows or fished in the clear waters. Nobody explored the rocky mountains or stared up at the clouds. Odin and Vili and Ve knew that the world is not a world until it is inhabited. They wandered high and low looking for people, and they found nothing. At last, on the rocky shingle at the edge of the sea, they found two logs, sea-tossed, that had floated there on the tides and been cast ashore. The first log was a log of ash wood. The ash tree is resilient and handsome, and its roots go deep. Its wood carves well and will not split or crack. Ashwood makes a good tool handle or the shaft of a spear. The second log they found beside the first on the beach. So close to the first log, they were almost touching. It was a log of elm wood. The elm tree is graceful, but its wood is hard enough to be made into the toughest planks and beams. You can build a fine home or a hall from elm wood. The gods took the two logs. They set the logs so that they were upright on the sand, the height of people. Odin held them, and one by one he breathed life into them. No longer were they dead logs on the beach, they were now alive. Vili gave them will. He gave them intelligence and drive, and now they could move, and they could want. Ve carved the logs. He gave them the shape of people. He carved their ears that they might hear, and their eyes that they might see, and lips that they might speak. The two logs stood on the beach, two naked people. They carved one with male genitals, and the other had carved female. The three brothers made clothes for the woman and the man, to cover themselves and to keep them warm, in the chilly sea spray on the beach at the edge of the world. Last of all, they gave the two people they had made names. The man they called Ash, and the woman they called Embla. Ash and Embla were the father and the mother of us all. Every human being owes its life to its parents and their parents and their parents before them. Go far enough back and the ancestors go all the way back to Ask and Embla. Embla and Ask stayed in Midgard, safe behind the wall the gods had made from Ymir's eyelashes. In Midgard, they would make their homes, protected from giants and monsters and all the dangers that wait in the wastes. In Midgard, they could raise their children in peace. That is why Odin is called the All-Father, because he was the father of the gods, and because he breathed the breath of life into our grandparents, 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 and so on. Whether we are gods or mortals, Odin is the father of us all.
Ooh. It's very Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Well, not really. I mean, the story of Genesis, that's a really intricate story, actually. It depends also, because it depends, like if you take the version from the standard Bible, it's sort of fairly boring. But if you look at all the other versions that were there that didn't make it to the Bible, it's really convoluted and weird. Like the whole thing is super weird. Like you should, I'll send you something about Gnosticism.
Okay.
because there it's actually flipped on its head. Like God is actually evil in the Gnostic way
Okay.
of looking at it. It's a whole different pantheon. Like the old Christianity, the early Christianity was actually much more uh, polytheistic and animistic
Yeah.
than the one we see today.
That
You
doesn't
even have
surprise
that.
me
You
at
even
all.
have that later. No, 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 no. I mean, like it really was, and you even have like later on, if you go to like mystics such as Franz of Assisi, for instance, who is, I think, from God, when is he from? Like 1200s, 1300s, something like that. He died in 1226. But like if you read his hymns, they're all about like brother wind and sister, sister water, sister river, and mother earth, and father sky, father sun, and those kind of things. Like
Mhm.
it's much more animistic.
Yeah.
And that's also what I'm trying to say. Like the the Genesis story actually is really really interesting, and really detailed and so on. We don't really get that in this version, unfortunately. It's just a couple of logs of wood, and you know,
I'll have to,
yeah, it
yeah,
could
I'll
have
have
been
to
fun.
check it out. We will let's wrap this up for today because I have the main
Yeah,
show
yeah,
to
let's
do
do that.
soon. And Rocco's needs a little
Yeah,
walk before we do. But I think this is a good decision. I think we've made the right choice to
yeah,
reboot once again, and it's much easier to follow. I think people will enjoy this a lot.
totally. Now let's just go through Neil Gaiman, or what we can do if we're doing what do you call it? If we do episodes that are has to be aired, then I don't think we can do Gaiman. Those ones we'll have to do different versions of them. Can we?
I think we could. I think we could. We can look into it. We'll look into it and see. But I'm pretty sure we can. Yeah.
Yeah, we can try, and then if they come after us, we can always say, "Hey, man, we're just plugging it for the Nordic, for the Horns
Yeah,
of Odin website. You can buy it there. Like the
yeah.
fuck, dudes. Like,
You're getting your
yeah,
you're getting your cut. No, I'm pretty sure you can. Um,
okay, we'll
yeah,
just try. We'll just try.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll be
yeah, yeah.
fine. All right, man. Thank you very
No
much.
worries.
See
All
you
right.
soon. Hopefully people enjoyed this one, and we'll yeah, I think we'll carry on like this.
Bye,
It's
everybody, and remember, if anyone comes and like is like an anti-trans, this, that, and the other, you can always go and say, "Hey, man,
uh,
first fucking creature ever in Nordic mythology. It's a goddamn transgender.
nice. There
So
you go.
fuck you."
All right, man.
All
Speak to you
right.
soon. Take care.
See ya.